What's going on, everybody? It is Jamie and welcome to the channel Thrift on Fire. This week we're going to check off another province in the Let's Talk About Reselling in Canada playlist. This time it's Alberta. Yeah, Calgary, Alberta zone. Matthew from the Matt Cart channel. Now Matt was recently resided in Toronto, Ontario for a long time. I think he just moved out there in May. He'll tell you all about that right here in a second. But yeah, Matt Cart. Let's get into it. So we're here with my buddy Matt. He's currently in Alberta, so Calgary, Alberta, so we can check off another province on the list here. But for people who don't know who you are, maybe you can just give us a little introduction to yourself and let us know who you are.
Yeah, so name's Matthew. I have a YouTube channel called Matt Cart, and it first started off as like a video game hunting channel, and then when we didn't find a lot of video games, we kind of pivoted towards just reselling in general. More specifically, toys is like the niche that we me and my wife, when I say we target when we go out to like yard sales, when we go to thrift stores, and now even the Goodwill bins in Calgary, which in Toronto, which I don't know if you're wearing a Blue Jays hat. I don't know if you're in Toronto. You're in Ontario though, right?
Closer to London, Ontario. I go to Toronto often because I'm a huge Jays fan, but I'm about an hour and a half from Toronto.
Okay, yeah. So I lived in Toronto for 35 years, and I found that when it comes to thrift stores there was a few gems, but for the most part, it's very difficult to find stuff at thrift stores. And the fact that they also didn't have like a Goodwill bins there. And in Calgary, they actually have a Goodwill bins, which is, when I found that out, I'm surprised it took me so long to find that out. It took me over a month living in Calgary as a reseller. It's pretty bad to take you 1 month to realize, holy crap, they have a bin store here. And then when we actually discovered the bin store, it was like instantaneous hits. However, I do prefer yard sales more than anything else. I don't know if you are in that same boat.
Yes, absolutely. So my main two ways of sourcing are the Goodwill bins in London, Ontario, which I don't know if you've ever been to that particular bins,
No.
and yard sailing. If it wasn't for that darn winter that hits every year, yard sales dry up a little bit. I do like thrift stores as well. Obviously, my channel name is Thrift on Fire, so I definitely enjoy thrift stores, but really, garage sales, I think, is probably my favorite way to source. Obviously, if you're just getting into the bins and stuff yourself now, value-wise, you're paying.
You can't really beat the bins for value. The problem is you're picking for a long time to try to find stuff. Versus yard sales, it's more just the thrill of not knowing what you're going to find. That's what I just love about garage sales. It's amazing. Like, you just never know what you're going to find. It could be one of those days where you randomly go to a yard sale and it's like, oh, my kids moved and now I don't know what to do with all these Pokemon cards. So like, there's these little gems that can happen. It doesn't happen a lot, but I've recorded quite a few instances where we've gotten great Lego scores, which is just unbelievable. That was actually one of the items to one of your questions that you sent me earlier. That was actually one of the items I was going to talk about the most when it comes to bolo items. Like Lego is just insane. I never realized the value of Lego. I was never a massive collector or kid who enjoyed Lego a lot. I mean, I had a few Lego sets, but my wife was more into Lego than I was. So when we were buying these like Lego bulk bins that would have a manual, she'd end up like somehow using the internet, like there's a few websites. Bricklink will let you know which parts are in each, and you can actually download manuals as well if you don't have them on the Lego website. She would like build these old sets we're basically turning these like $20 Lego buys into like $300, $400 in like Lego sets. It was insane. Like it was amazing. Just insane. There's nothing like it when it comes to reselling for toys. I find Lego is just incredible. Just even at the bins, you're paying fractions of a dollar for like a minifigure that might be at the bottom of the bin. That minifigure could be worth like $10 to $15, and you're paying almost nothing for it. So I find Lego to be really good.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've watched a good amount of your videos. Actually, the first video I actually seen of yours was quite a while back. I think it was when in Canada eBay was going to start charging HST, and you did a video of that, and that's how I kind of stumbled across you. And then I just randomly have watched some of your videos, and then when I knew we were going to talk, I went back and watched some more recent videos. The one thing that impresses me quite a bit about you, even when you're in thrift stores, is your knowledge of toys. I can see that's a passion of yours. You're like looking through the bags and you're talking about, you can clearly see this is this toy from this series and whatever. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's weird because I've always liked toys. And that's the funny thing. Lego, you'd think that I'd be into Lego a long time ago, but it's more of a recent hobby. I was into Marvel Legends for a long time. I was into very specific toy lines when I was a kid. I was always collecting something. I just felt like the urge to collect. And it's funny, being a reseller, you're kind of like, I mean, you kind of collect in a weird way through your store, but also you have to be aware of how much inventory you're holding, because as much as I like to collect, as you can see in the background, I have some displays there. You have to also know when is the appropriate time to resell. But toy knowledge definitely kind of led to our niche, and that's why like we specifically look for toys. But we obviously are resellers, so we branch off in everything, and our knowledge is growing as our channel grows.
And I know you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but I think you said like you started to get into video games and you're looking to pick those up to resell. But what really is that what got you into reselling? Just that you realized there was value in these things you were finding?
Yeah. So like I was always into like buying things low to sell, but I never really understood that there is a whole niche called resellers. So in the toy community back, like when I was into Marvel Legends, there would be people who'd buy out like certain figures from a set, which would go for more money on eBay or something like that. But they were called scalpers. So I didn't realize like that was a form of reselling, but that was more of a negative spin on a reseller. Some people still hear the name reseller and there's like a negative spin to it. But when it comes to getting into reselling, video games definitely was the thing that got me fully into reselling. And we have had some pretty good video game scores in the past, but I do think when it comes to any of the niches that people can go out to hunt for at garage sales and thrift stores, video games is probably the most picked over. It's probably the most overhyped out of anything. I would actually say when it comes to any sort of, this is going to be a controversial take. It's going to be a hot take. But I think it's the biggest waste of time is video games when it comes to reselling. Because the amount of yard sales that I go to and I'll ask, because like, you know, you have to ask, hey, do you have any video games? You're the fifth person that asked that today. So it's basically a very oversaturated, which is weird because Lego, I think sells for higher than even video games, but it's not as oversaturated as a reseller market because there is still a lot of collectors out there versus when it comes to video games, I think there is a lot of demand out there, but I think during the pandemic, there was like an explosion in video game hype. And I don't think there's as many interested collectors as there are people trying to flip stuff for money for video games. So like I do still look for video games, and there is still some pretty good video game scores I've had even recently in Calgary. But for the most part, like the video game stuff will sit versus the Lego stuff will sell very fast.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I know I'm currently using video games again for myself to, so I don't know if you sell on ebay.com or .ca, but I've been a .ca since day one, and I've started a .com store, and I'm actually using cheaper video games to start to build my feedback and get some sales. I found it really good for that because if you're not looking for high value out of your games, you can definitely sell some cheap games quickly still. But yeah, you're not going to hit home runs with a lot of these, you know, entry level video games, but there's still some value in them for sure.
Yeah, so I use .ca. Actually, it's funny that you
CA
said that. So when you're saying that's just the USA handle, right? .com, or is there an actually? So when you made your account, do you have two accounts, or do you?
Two accounts, and it's
Wow.
not super easy. I think before there was a .ca, it was easy because that's what you had to do. So I use a cross-border shipper. So I actually, even though I live in Ontario, I want it to look like I live in Buffalo. So I want to look like an American selling in the US, even though I'm Canadian. I'm just using a cross-border company who's taking it across. So the biggest thing is when you're selling a .com, I'm getting paid in American money. And I have access, if I want to, use United States Postal Service and get eBay discounts. I've found the third-party shipper I'm already using is cheaper anyway, but the option is there. And I have found in the past too that some people, even though Canada is just across the border, some people still don't like to buy from Canadian sellers because of duty, or maybe they're confused by the difference in the dollar, right? So yeah, I think there's some benefit to .com, but it's just sort of an experiment I just started in the last few months, and it's been interesting.
I might have to pick your brain about that further on, not right now,
sure,
because that is interesting. I might look into that because I do think that there's a bigger market for sure, especially when it comes to collectibles in the States. Not that I don't get sales from Canadian buyers, but when I look at the transactions and the sales in my summary page on eBay, I think about 80% of my sales come from the States, which is crazy, even though I'm a Canadian seller using a .ca.
Yeah, and probably depending. Well, here's a good segue, I guess. So I was going to ask you probably locations, part of that as well. But what do you think the pros and the cons in your location are? And we can start with shipping, because that was going to be my question. I feel like shipping is probably tough in your particular area.
Yeah, I think Calgary shipping costs are a little more expensive because we're kind of away from a lot of other populated areas, not just in Canada, but in the States. When I was in Toronto, I think it was a little easier to maybe make sales because shipping was a little bit lower. A lot of people, you look at the population density in like Eastern Canada and Eastern United States, there's a lot more people there. So the shipping would take less time. So it'd be less, cost for the distance, but also for the timing for the shipping. So I feel like that definitely is a bit of a hindrance living in Calgary. But there's other things that are good about Calgary versus Toronto. Like I talked about the bins. That is one factor. Calgary does have bins, which is nice because that gives me something to do during the winter time. Because in Toronto, I love doing garage sales. And then when the wintertime hits, it's literally just overpriced thrift stores, and that's what really sucks. So a lot of the winter, we would, just for content for the channel, we'd start building Lego sets that we've actually got throughout the summer. Because we don't really have much else to do. We can't really go to a bin store or yard sales, which is a horrible thing about being in Canada. Is like we don't have access to year-round yard sales, which I'm very jealous about people living in the lower states. Especially basically anything mid-level down in the States, you can get access to yard sales all year
round. And it's funny when you're listening to some like a couple podcasts I listen to, and even American sellers, they talk about because it's warmer weather, there's like a Wednesday yard sale, things like that, right? It's that would be so nice, especially in our line of work here. Yeah. So when you were in Toronto, were you using third-party shipping companies? Chit Chats is a pretty big one, right? I don't personally like that one. I use Stallion Express. Sendo is another one, depending on where you live. Do you use those type of companies, or are you just strictly a Canada Post guy?
So it's funny you asked that. It's never really dawned on me because I usually print the shipping labels via eBay and it'll just go straight to Canada Post.
Yep.
So we've basically just been using Canada Post. But if our store grows, because we're still doing this part-time, if we end up growing the store like immense, like 2 to 3 times the size that it is right now, we don't have a lot of items in our store right now. We only have like maybe 350 items, which is not like a crazy amount. But if we like maybe tripled that, I would look into alternatives because I want to be selling on a more frequent basis.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I think you'd be surprised. I think at the end of the day, if you have good quality items, people will buy them regardless. But you can save some serious money on shipping through some of these companies. They're not always super convenient, depending. I've had some that you could drop off locally at different places. The one I currently go to, luckily, London, Ontario is about an hour for me. So I drive an hour just to drop off my shipping. But that's where the Goodwill bins is. So obviously I make the best of my day and I hit the bins. I do that a couple times a week. So it's definitely worth it for me. But yeah, if you're not, I don't really know in your area what's available, but I know like Tabs was on the channel. I don't know if you know her channel at all, but she actually uses the same one I do, but she takes her items and ships them in a box to, I think she told me BC. So it's from Saskatchewan to BC, and it's still giving her, savings. So, and I think that's mostly on Poshmark for her. So it's a little bit different, but yeah, something to think about for sure. Yeah. What else do you think is like a pro in this area? So like you've been here for how long? You've been in Calgary for now? You said a few months.
Like the end of May.
End of May.
Yeah. So so it hasn't been too long to really know the benefits of the area apart from the bins. I do know that from anecdotal experience that they have more of a yard sale culture in Calgary than in Toronto. I don't know if it's because there's just more family homes, but you will see like a lot of community yard sales versus in Toronto, there would be maybe 2 to 4 a year, maybe. And then Calgary, from these websites that I'll check out, that'll give you some information about what's going on. It's called like Calgary Family Fun, I think. There's like 10 to 15 community yard sales, plus a bunch of church sales. So it's crazy because even with like maybe a third or a quarter, even I would say, of the population of Toronto, it feels like they have a lot more yard sales. But unfortunately, we're still in Canada at the end of the day, so that's limited regardless.
Yeah, for sure. So I think I know the answer to this anyway, but we'll still ask. So in your business, I'm sure if I was going to guess, I think you're mostly focusing on toys and collectibles. Where do you see your business going, and what are you focusing on exactly?
Right now, the niche is toys. I am looking to one day do reselling full time along with like YouTube as a backup source of income. But I am looking to branch more into clothing. If I was going to say where I'm going to shift focus in the next few months. So my wife actually did open up a Poshmark store. So any of the clothing that we get now, either from the bins or wherever else, thrift stores, yard sales, we are going to be posting it on the Poshmark store, which is a whole new experience for me. So that's very interesting. It's going to be a great endeavor, I think, moving forward, because I think clothing sells so much better on Poshmark than eBay. Like we only had like 6 or 7 items on Poshmark and 2 things have sold.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
I love
like
Poshmark
by any means at clothing. I think I have like a fairly good understanding of certain brands, but I'll watch some YouTubers and they'll be explaining certain brands that they'll pick up and it'll just go right over my head. I'm like, I did not know that it was even a thing. Like for me, I like to look for jerseys and stuff, and I'm kind of a nerd, so anything with like a graphic that is like a superhero or something that I know, I'm like, hey, if it's at the bins, it might be worth a shot picking it up for like 50 cents, not even that. But when it comes to like clothing, I would mostly go for jerseys or like vintage shirts. But even vintage shirts, I don't know about you, if you feel the same way. I have very difficult time finding vintage shirts. Even in Toronto, it's very difficult. I think I maybe found 2 or 3 shirts that I would have considered vintage in my entire time reselling in Toronto.
Yeah, I find a good amount, but I'm certainly digging for them, and it's something that I like. So I sort of know what I'm looking for now. But but to go back to your point about the bins and clothing, I think if you're building a Poshmark store, now in general, this would be bad advice. I wouldn't say if you're going to thrift stores to do this at all, but if you pick up kind of mall brands like American Eagle like if you're selling blue jeans and stuff like that, they will sell like those type of things, like blue jeans, even if they are like Levi's, American Eagle. Trying to think of another, like even Guess jeans. Like at the bins, you're not going to pay only like a couple dollars max. They are a little heavier, obviously, than a t-shirt, but blue jeans always sell. And to build up your Poshmark, that would be great. You're probably only going to get like turn $2 into $20, but still, it's pretty decent. A lot of times I'll go to the bins and pick up like all kinds of clothing that are, I do look for some bigger brand clothing, like, I don't know, like Aritzia stuff and Free People and like, the sort of the poshy brands. But for the most part, I'm okay picking up mall type brands because they don't sell for big money. But for me, they always do sell on there. And Poshmark for me has been a pretty big game changer. I would say probably about half of my income now comes from Poshmark.
Wow. Yeah. That is substantial. So that's something I'm definitely going to take a look at. It's funny that you said Guess jeans because that was one of the things that did sell.
Yeah, which I would never think that. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right about the mall brands, like is because people are going to look at the price, like $20 for used jeans. You're pretty much paying that at Valley Village now, anyways. If you've seen the prices for them, so if you can get it at the bins and you could sell it for like thrift store prices, it's still a good flip. Like it's not great money, but it's something that'll move. You're saying, so that's good.
Yeah, it is, and it will build up. You'll get some feedback and stuff, and you can. Not that it's super important on Poshmark, but you can work to become their top tiers, like the ambassador program. You can definitely get into there, and we can talk about it more in depth offline. But if you're interested and you do get really into Poshmark, there are a couple automation tools you can use that are fantastic. Because one of the worst things about Poshmark when you're just getting into it is you have to be very social to sell. They want you to share and participate in all these things that take time. You can, once you get things set up in Poshmark, you can automate it where you don't have to do those things, but you still can reap the rewards because you do get, there's benefits of doing those things. It pushes you up the server, all sorts of things.
Okay. Yeah. I might have to pick your brain about that one as well.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll just keep rolling here with the questions. So, One of the things I told you we're going to talk about is a bolo list. If you want to give me your top 5, that'd be great. If you want to give me more than that, that's fine. But yeah, I'm always interested to know what people, if you walked into a thrift store or went into a yard sale, what would be the first thing you would gravitate towards?
Okay, so I was thinking about this list and I was like, well, my niche is toys. So I'm like, I don't want to make it a list of 5 things that are just toys, but I also don't want to make it just one thing that's toys, to just make it very broad and say, hey, toys is the number one thing you should look for. So I'll break it down with 5 things. Maybe 2 or 3 are going to be toys and the rest will be something else.
Sure.
So one thing for sure, Lego, since I've already mentioned it, I'm not going to go into great depth about why it's such a great thing to resell, but of course Lego it's the biggest toy brand in the world.
Now, this was absolutely insane. They were bringing out new bins. This is always the most exciting time at the Goodwill bins, is when they're actually bringing out the new bins and you're kind of waiting in your spot hoping that you get lucky to be dropped in front of a perfect haul, and that's exactly what we did today. I was placed right directly in front of a huge lot of Lego Bionicle stuff, and there were some real gems in there. I basically just started grabbing them aside, putting them down in the bin, picking them one by one, and it looked like no one else was interested in them. I don't know if they didn't know that these weren't Lego, because obviously Lego Bionicle, they are very different. Like the bricks and pieces that you use are very different, so maybe people just didn't know that they were Lego, but I knew exactly what they were, and that's why I'm crazy happy about the haul that we got.
Probably the most intellectual property use out of any sort of toy brand, the way it branches off in different IPs, which means that it can actually grab more attention and more hobbyists and enthusiasts, not just people who are just into the generic Lego City stuff. So you have a very wide net of people who are interested in Lego. So Lego is a great thing to pick up. And a lot of people it's a lot of hassle, right? People don't want to do the work for Lego, but if you do the work, the rewards, like I've seen me and my wife just from building some of the sets, or just figuring out what pieces go with what, and like even minifigure heads versus a bulk buy. It's some work. It definitely is some work, but it really does pay off. And the second one, believe it or not, is so this is kind of a vintage toy, but My Little Pony.
Okay, yeah.
So at the Goodwill bins, for example, we will pick out any sort of My Little Pony we see that's in the bin. Sometimes you have to be careful because there's a lot of knockoff My Little Pony brands. But what we will do is we'll just kind of pick them together, lot them up. We'll make sure there's none that are worth over $10+ because then we list it on its own. And then we just make these lots on eBay and they sell a lot. So
That's
another
awesome.
one I would say for number 3 is another toy item. This will be the last toy item, I promise. Littlest Pet Shop. So Littlest Pet Shop, you know that one?
I know
so
all
they're
about
very
them.
small. They have these googly eyes. You have to be. Sometimes they're a little bit hard to, because there is a brand. So many different brands that kind of like to copy each other. But we had a few good scores in Calgary, and that's actually how we found them at a yard sale. And we did a few research, through Google Lens, like we like to do, and we realized how fast they sell. But there's also some individual ones that sell for like $100+. So just be careful with that. Take pictures of them. It is something that people really enjoy, something that people have nostalgia for when they were kids and they want to buy back their childhood. And then for number 4, so it's an electronic, but it's something that sold well for us, at least in Toronto. We haven't been able to buy too much in Calgary, but it's a DVD and VHS combo units. I don't know what it is. It's like if you just get a regular DVD player, they won't really sell. I mean, they can, but versus like the DVD VHS combo units, obviously the better the brand, the better the sale, the more premium. But you can find them all day at yard sales sometimes between like $1 to $10, and the Sony ones can sometimes sell for almost $100. And they're very easy to test, especially if you have the proper TV, which I think every reseller should have, like a TV or a video game system to test whatever you have. But very good. We've sold quite a few of them in Toronto. So that would be my 4th bolo item. And then for the 5th item is an interesting one. And I mean, it's going to be something that's like a no-brainer. And that's why it's maybe one all the way to the bottom on the list, number 5, but that would be jerseys.
Okay.
So jerseys, especially retro jerseys, they do sell for a higher premium as long as they're in good condition. And you can find them a lot, maybe at the bins if are in a place that you have access to bins. Even at thrift stores, I've found quite a few jerseys at Value Villages, which is like a Savers in the States, whoever's watching in the States. And you'll get them for like $10. And some of these NFL jerseys will sell for between like $60 to $100 used, sometimes even more. And same thing as soccer jerseys. Sometimes you'll even find soccer jerseys in like the t-shirt aisle. And I'm a huge soccer fan. So like I'm always skimming and I just look for those Adidas pads or something as I'm going through the t-shirts, and I'll pick it out. And, you know, sometimes it'll be a knockoff brand, or it'll be like someone's old, like their adult league team that'll make money. But every once in a while you pull it out and it'll be like an actual big soccer brand. And it only takes a little bit of time to authenticate it, and you'd be surprised at what you can sell for what would basically be just a t-shirt.
Yeah, the last two for me hit home well. Jerseys, I love jerseys. And it's very similar. You know, you can find them in my area for about, I'll pay up to $20 depending on what it is, but I would say like $10 is pretty normal. And I sell so many jerseys, and it's something I think because I loved jerseys when I was a kid in sports so much. And I kind of grew out of that as I into my teens and 20s. And then as I get older again, I'm not doing so much stuff, and I'm getting back into sports. But I just love them because they feel very nostalgic for me. And a lot of them I just like to own even for a little bit and then watch them go. And then the DVD VCR combos, it's funny how many people believe that's like sort of a past thing and there's not money in them. I find they sell a little slower on eBay, but believe it or not, on Etsy, I can usually increase the price from eBay by about $20, and it'll still sell first on Etsy over eBay, which, you know, I don't know if it's because maybe the people, the community buying on Etsy maybe are a little bit more wealthy. I'm not really sure if that's the case. I've been told that. I don't know if I believe that or not, but it seems to be I can get better money on Etsy, which it seems like a weird thing to sell on Etsy in the first place, but, you know, I sell a ton of them over there.
That's something I have not opened up yet. I do have a Poshmark, very recent, and obviously eBay, but Etsy is definitely something I'd be interested in, especially something like DVD VHS combos, because that is one of the things that I do hunt for.
Yeah, and toys are big on Etsy. You would do well with toys. You might even do better dollar-wise for some of these toys. One that I thought maybe might hit your bolo list that didn't was maybe Monster High. I don't know if you actually look for many of those.
No,
but some of those are big value.
Oh yeah, so that is something it could have easily swapped places with the Littlest Pet Shop, but I find Littlest Pet Shop, because they're so small, it's a little bit more bang for your buck. But yeah, I mean, as you say that, yeah, I did list some Monster High dolls like last week, so it was something I found in the good old bins, believe it or not. So
oh wow,
yeah, because there's a whole bin of just Barbie stuff, and then like I was digging through, it was the first person to get into the bin store on a Saturday. And I always go straight to the toy bins first. And I was pushing through a bunch of like, you know, naked Barbies. And then I found a few things with clothing that had like colorful hair. I'm like, what the heck are these? I'm like, well, I knew what they were. I think they're Monster High. And I picked them out. And sure enough, one of them was like worth $80. So it's crazy. Wow. Yeah.
The crazy thing about them too is people will buy them for parts if they're the right ones. The last one I sold was maybe $90, and it was supposed to have wings, and one of the wings was missing, and it was missing most of the original clothing, and it still sold for, you know, like $80-$90. So it was insane.
Wow.
Like I think if it was complete, even out of box, I think that particular one was a couple $100, but yeah, that's pretty wild.
Oh, I believe it. I've seen some of the comps. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, definitely. So you've been obviously been doing this for a little while now. But what do you think, if you could kind of run it back to when you first started reselling, what is something you wish you would have knew right away before you got too deep into it?
Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna have to reuse some of the same sound bites. But honestly, what I wish I would have known sooner was a few things. One is a little bit more about clothing.
Okay.
Then I wouldn't have passed up so much good clothing deals early on. But Lego, because I went into it mostly because of video games, and one of the first big scores we had on the channel was one that I didn't even know was a score. We bought a big bin full of Lego when we were at a place looking for video games, and I didn't even know much. I offered like I think $5 at first, and she said something like 20, and I said 10, and then she's like, okay. So I picked up this gigantic bin of Lego for $10, and I was just picking through them. Like, there's a Yoda minifigure there. There's a Stormtrooper. I didn't know much about them. I didn't know much. Like, I knew they're Star Wars, and like I figured they might have been worth something. But when it came to just going home and scanning all the toys, it was insane. Like I just wish that I would have done a little bit more extra work, because there might have been so much more stuff within that bin, and we ended up just like lotting a few things up, and we still made a crazy good profit. But I feel like that one $10 bin could have been $1,000, but we pretty much only got like $200 out of it.
Okay.
So that might have, if I would have known about that a little early on, I think I would have been into reselling a lot more, and I would have been into it sooner if I would have known that Lego sold the way
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Is that what you think? You think that really sparked the excitement for you, that you could see like,
yeah. Oh, for sure. The
excitement,
especially for yard sales, because that was a yard sale score, it just sparked this huge excitement of like going out to yard sales, which toy bins are, parents just getting rid of, what's the price? Like there's just this excitement of learning so much more about the hobby, that I think that's why I like going in niches, but it's obviously good to know a lot about any particular niche, because that helps you as a reseller. But when it comes to just diving deep into something like Lego and just the world and everything, the minifigures, the sets, and the age and how timeless of a toy it is, I wish I would have known this stuff earlier, and I wish I would have actually gotten into Lego as a kid and not like Toy Biz Batman figures and stuff.
Yeah, I was really into the Ninja Turtle figures and stuff like that as a kid, and I've had a couple pretty good scores where, like you said, somebody's mom's pretty much cleaning out the basement, and there's a bin full of, it's got to break this kid's heart when he knows the mom sold them for like $20.
Oh, I know that is the painful part about it. It's like just thinking it like in his shoes, but then I'm like, you know what? I had the crappy toys when I was a kid, so maybe go.
Yeah. A lot of secondhand toys here too. So is there anything else you want to touch base on?
Yeah, how are the yard sales near you in Langton, Ontario?
Yeah, in this area they've been pretty good. I would have to say the only thing that's slightly annoying in Ontario these days is a lot of people want eBay prices for their yard sale items, and sometimes they'll go as far as you'll go there and they'll have prices on it. Or I've been at different sales where somebody looks something up and shows you, and it's like, well, that's not even a sold comp, that's a listed type of thing.
That's the worst. That's the worst, is like when they think that that's the price, and you're like, and as someone who does resell, it just grinds your gears, because you're like, no, you don't get it.
It's not even
just that. Have you seen people who I've seen this before, where they'll actually have a printed sheet that shows they went and printed off not even a sold listing, a listed price of that on eBay, and then they stick it to the side of it and be like, that's what it sells for on eBay, so don't offer me anything crazy low. It's like, that's not even a sold comp. Like, it's just insane.
It's you almost know that they're not going to sell it, but that's like I've said a bunch of times in my videos, when something's clearly overpriced, people can price their things however they want. It's their yard sale, it's whatever. I don't get offended by it. I usually don't even try to barter if the price is ridiculous. I'll just be like, okay, that's not in the cards for today, type thing.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm interested in your Goodwill bins, because so I don't know on YouTube or in different channels you watch, but like if you watch, do you watch Harry Tornado, Josh Farnell? Yeah. So when he goes to the Goodwill bins, their Goodwill bins are like gaylords that seem like they've been out all day. And I'm like, oh, that seems interesting. And they're digging through. I know the one in Langton, Ontario isn't like that. They change out maybe every 5 minutes, they change out a bin, and then, people will line up and it gets kind of crazy for a few minutes, and they keep doing that. Sometimes they change out clothing, sometimes they change out electronics, sometimes hard goods, and it just kind of rotates until they go on their lunch break, and that's how it goes. So I'm just curious, same type of model?
Yeah, it's the ones that aren't too deep, the big blue bins that aren't too deep, and they change them out pretty much every. They change it out. Well, it depends on what item, but yeah, every 5 minutes or so you see one bin leave. When it comes to toys, the one thing that does suck is that is usually the ones that I feel like are neglected the most. Like we'll go there hunting for toys, and then they'll take away the toy bins that we've already went through. But then it'll be like, oh, they're bringing out more clothing, and that's fine. That's why I want to get more into clothing, because I want to take advantage of being in a city that does have bins, because toys to me, the best place to find them is yard sales, even more so than bins. So once the yard sale season's over, I want to focus a little bit more on toys, not toys, clothing as I can, just to maximize the amount of sales and stuff that I can actually source.
Thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it. I hope you're nothing but the best in your new ventures here in Calgary. And yeah, all the best.
Yeah, thank you. Stay in touch. It'd be great to build more of a Canadian reselling community, because the States, we got to compete with the States, and they have a huge community there. They got Harry Tornadoes, probably bigger than probably every Canadian reseller combined.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been one of the neat things doing this series, trying to talk to somebody from every province. I've made some pretty good connections with people, and it's not everybody has to be a YouTuber that's on this particular series about talking to different resellers in Canada. But I have met some pretty unique people, and be nice to do some more content like this for sure.
Happy to get another one of these under the belt. A lot of fun. I love talking to people from other provinces. I wish Matthew nothing but the best. He's doing really well in reselling. He's going to start listing on other platforms. I think that will serve him well, trying to build his business. But, anyway, guys, if you like videos like this, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing for more content. Until next time, take care, stay safe. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.